Have you ever been called bossy or aggressive
Oh,
or
all
assertive?
my life. Yeah. And once upon a time I worried about it. Now I'm like, yes.
Love that.
Absolutely. And I guess it goes with your own boss. Why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Why not?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lucy, and I'm joined by Nikki, who is my co-founder. And we are kicking off with the first episode of our very special new series called Her and Boss Executive Series, where we are showcasing and spotlighting very impressive and inspirational executive women from a variety of different industries. So today we are so excited to be interviewing Jayne Opperman, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Barclays UK. Jayne has over 25 years experience in technology leadership within financial services and is responsible for managing a team across the globe, which I think speaks for itself, really. Jayne, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Great to be here.
Cool. Let's get into it then. So Jayne, I read a really interesting interview that you did with Barclays maybe a couple of years ago, and they asked you about diversity and inclusion within the technology space. And you said that you felt that the D&I dial hadn't really shifted much in the last 25 years. And I felt like that was really interesting because a lot of executives and senior people in quite a lot of industries nowadays boast and talk about how much the dial has shifted. For example, the cosmetics industry, 10 years ago, you couldn't go into a makeup shop and find foundation that wasn't for white skin. And you look on a catwalk now and you're seeing men and women of all different shapes and sizes walk down, and that's excellent. And we're creating space for everyone to flourish. But I agree with you on the tech side of things. I don't think it has. And when I did a little bit of research, I've got a stat here. I found that in the UK, 31% of tech jobs are held by women, but less than 10% of leadership roles in tech are held by women. And that's really, really low. And I'd be really keen to hear about why you think the dial hasn't shifted that much and what we can do to shift it.
It's such a great question. And I think when I was at university a very long time ago, or the last century, as my kids refer to it as.
Oh no.
Mum, you were at university in the last century. Yeah. I think there were 12 of us out of 88 or whatever it was in my first technology degree. And I remember looking around the room at the time thinking, wow, this will never be this bad ever again. Can only be up from here. And yet, to your stat, we're not really addressed it in technology as much as maybe we are elsewhere. I think there's lots of reasons for it. I think it's anything from we still don't get enough girls at school going into STEM projects and programs of work and studying STEM projects, subjects. And I don't know why that is. I don't think they think it's exciting. I don't think that we do a good job of explaining that, given technology controls just about every aspect of our life, why wouldn't you want an opportunity to influence on that kind of scale? And why is it that girls and women don't feel confident to really take on the world? I think a lot of it is confidence, and I think a lot of it is a misconception that technology is full of people who kind of just do programming in the cupboard or a dark corner. And it's so different. My experience, it's taken me across the world. It's one of the most transferable skills. So despite the fact that I've spent most of my career in financial services, if you understand technology, you can pretty much work in any industry, any geography. And it's just such a way of having a degree of influence. And, in my role now, having had a degree of success and been really fortunate, part of my job is to talk about these things and to pull as many people up with me as I can.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's interesting you said, getting women interested at a young age into, you know, jobs like tech is really important. When I was little, and I think something that's really underrated are like the books that you read, and or like the children's books you read, or the children's
Yes.
shows that you read, and every single engineer or tech wasn't, I guess, a massive
Scientist,
thing,
wow.
or like mathematics and things. It was all male
Yes.
characters, and it wasn't even a thing for me when I was growing up. And it's really nice to see, you know, like the Mr. Men books, they're now having like Little Miss Engineer, and I think that that's going to make such a difference because you're sparking interest young, and you're also like, this is something that you can do, and I think that's so good to
Yes.
see. So I mean, hopefully the dial will be shifting very soon. But no, I completely agree.
Do you ever, I wonder, so that stat that Lucy said around less than 10% of leadership roles in tech being held by women in the UK, when you're kind of sat in a meeting room, whether it be virtual or in person, do you ever take notice if you're the only woman in the room? And I ask that because I think for me, being kind of earlier in my career, I think I do notice, but I don't know if that's like an aspect kind of, I guess if that's because of my inexperience. And so I kind of let that imposter syndrome kind of come in because I feel like, oh, I've not done this before, I'm feeling a bit nervous, or if it's because I am visibly like the only woman in the room. I wonder if you ever experience that.
You know, I probably experience it most weeks, if not most days. And
I
over
don't know
a
if that's
period of
reassuring to
time,
you or not.
well, over a period of time, you almost get numb to it, and I think you have to stay alive to it, and you have to keep asking the question, particularly of those groups. You know, why is it? You know, look at the screen. In some respects, working virtually, you know, when everybody's sat on the screen in a little box, it's even more obvious the lack of diversity, whether it's, you know, the same color, the same gender, whatever it is. So I think we do need to keep noticing it, and we do need to be alive to it. We do need to keep calling it out. You know, despite the stats that we talked about in technology, you know, in the area of the bank in Barclays that I work in, we have shifted over the last 3 years. We've moved the percentage of directors and managing directors, we've increased that by 10%. But that's a real focus. And I think if you'd have asked me 10 years ago, you know, should you have targets for, you know, these underrepresented groups, whether it's different ethnicities, sexual orientation, gender, I would have maybe once upon a time felt uncomfortable. You know, we use words like ambitions, or, you know, we want to imagine a world where we don't even need these labels. But I think in the business world, we put targets on things that are important, whether that's profit, you know, revenue, whether we credit risk, cost. And I think by putting a target on it, we are signaling to the whole organization, this is important.
Yeah.
And I think it's making the difference.
Definitely.
But how does it make you feel, usually being the only woman in the boardroom or only woman in the calls? You know, like I look at you and I think like, or if I was you, it must be hard not to think like, I am amazing, or like I am pretty special. I am the only woman. How am I? You know, like no other women made it. That must be quite a common thought, no?
And we do think you're
that's amazing.
Don't worry.
I think I need to record that and just play it, you know, and the occasions when I need it. There would have been a time when I just noticed it, and it probably put a lot of pressure on me, or, you know, I let it put pressure on myself. Nowadays, you know, I tend to look around the room and think, well, I've got at least as much experience, quite often more. You know, I've worked hard to get here, and now sometimes the point of difference is an advantage. You know, I'm not big on gender categories, you know, all women are this and all men are that, because we're all individuals. But I do think it's a difference that can be a positive thing. So nowadays I worry about it. I actively spend a lot of my time recruiting fabulous women, helping promote our women through the ranks, make sure that we're giving them real opportunities for real jobs. You know, it's not just a numbers game. We need to look around at the most important jobs or the biggest scale jobs and make sure we're putting women in those roles as well.
Yeah.
And then, you know, at one point I'll look around the room and it'll look just like, you know, any other room in the world or walking down the street, and that's what we've got to aim for.
Yeah, that's awesome. You said something, I can't remember if it was in this answer or the answer before, around the kind of terminology we use around, you know, being ambitious. And it reminded me of, in one of my previous kind of like development catch-ups, year-end reviews, my manager gave me some feedback and said I was really assertive. And I fully panicked and I was like, oh my gosh, I must be really unlikable. People think I'm too much. It wasn't until she explained that that was a good thing and that I'm confident and I say what I mean and I speak up. And I thought, oh my goodness, like, thank goodness, because I thought that I was getting some really poor feedback there. How do you think that the fact that there still are so many men in leadership positions changes the way we view good and bad leadership? Because my instinct was, oh, that's bad, I'm not doing well, I'm not going to be a leader. But actually it was, no, this is really good, you're going to succeed. So how do you think that plays into everything?
Well, as soon as you said that, I almost said, that's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I didn't think that.
That's amazing. Yeah. But once upon a time, I think we would have thought, oh gosh, do they mean I'm being too aggressive? But this assertive is the right word to use. You know, I hope, I'm not sure, but I hope the days of, you know, bossy, aggressive, you know, all those horrible terms they used to use about confident, assertive women have gone. I definitely think we're more accepting of, you know, behaviours being more about individuals and personal leadership styles and preferences, as opposed to being associated with one gender or the other.
Have you ever been called bossy or aggressive?
All my life, yeah. And once upon a time I worried about it. Now I'm like, yes. Absolutely. And I guess it goes with your, you know, your own boss. Why not? Absolutely. Why not?
Yeah.
There was an amazing film years ago, Jayne did it, and it was about women being the boss, and it used some of these terms. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's amazing.
Oh, cool.
Really good.
That's cool. Yeah. I wonder though, I personally think that if there are lots of men in leadership positions in an organization or an industry, junior people are constantly learning from them. And, you know, mentoring, you'd like to get, you know, learn from senior people. If you're constantly learning from men all the time, it means that you are learning kind of what success looks like from a man's perspective. And I, maybe slightly controversial, think that mentoring sometimes can hinder culture change if you're constantly learning from that same person. And that's why it's so important to have a diverse panel.
Yes, I agree.
What are your thoughts on mentoring in general? Do you think that have you had a good experience with mentoring? Have you had female mentors in your life?
Yeah, male, female. And look, it's a term we use a lot. I think what's important is sponsors. So you need mentors in your life to be on your agenda. That needs to be a confidential kind of relationship, a conversation where you really can get some honest feedback and some unbiased advice, where, you know, they're on your agenda trying to help you. But if they really are committed to helping you, then actually what you need is a sponsor, somebody who's going to really get to know you, give you some feedback, help you identify the things you're really great at so that you can do more of them, and then open doors for you. So introduce you to different networks, you know, opening your network to your mentees, tapping them on the shoulder when a job comes up, giving them confidence to put their hands up, speaking for them, you know, being an advocate in talent sessions, whatever it is. So I think mentors are invaluable, but sponsors are more valuable. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. And there's quite a lot of conversation, particularly now, around mentoring and sponsors and the importance of the two.
Yeah.
Do you believe in asking for people to be your sponsor? Or do you think that it's just naturally. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And look, most people, if you ask them for help, will help you. It's strange when you're the one asking for help, it can feel, your confidence can take a bit of a knock. But imagine, you're the one being asked, can you help me? Actually, it's a great feeling when somebody says, I really, could I just grab 20 minutes of your time? I've got a really important interview coming up, or I've got a real problem I'm struggling with. Could you spare me a few minutes to help me? In nearly 30 years, I don't think anybody has ever said no. So I really don't think you should be worried. And my advice would be ask for help, ask for feedback. I've worked with some brilliant people, including, and I do think, one of the things that I talk to a lot of my female mentees about is, if I'm working so hard and I'm doing everything and more that I'm asked and nobody's noticed, or I'm not getting promoted. And I think, we're all busy, and if people haven't noticed, it's not because there's any bad intent, but you have to signal it. You can't wait for somebody to notice. I will tell you this, if I advertise for a job, internally, the folk that knock on my door and say, oh, hey, just let you know, I'm going to apply for that job. By the way, I would be awesome. 9 out of 10 of those people would be men. And I don't know why that is, we've read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, whatever it is, we need to ask, we need to let people know that we're ambitious. We need to make sure that we're building the network, and that people who have an influence on that next role we want, they need to know that we're hungry and that, we want to put our hand up for that role, and we think we've earned the right and we're well qualified and ready for it. That's as much a part of the whole kind of promotion and career progression piece. You can ask for help, but you need to own it, and you need to kind of build your own story as you go.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I think having these discussions on podcasts and putting them out to junior people and young women is so important, because I think just recognizing that you don't do that is enough to combat it and completely. Because it sounds very simple, oh, there's a job you like, go up to them and tell them that you're interested and that you'd be good at it. But it is so easy. It's even happened to me. You're like, oh no, I'll just put my CV in, I don't want to bother them. But it's not. But learning, about what men do, it's almost enough. It annoys you enough to do it yourself. I'm very much with
exactly. Yeah, exactly right.
But what do you think? Because I agree. I think I can't remember what the exact stat is now, but about, women look at a job advert and they need to hit everything before they're like, yeah, I'll apply. Whereas men can have whatever percentage of the requirements and think, yeah, I'll give it a go. I'll be all right. And I think there are people, to your point, Jayne, there's the Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, saying women just need to lean in and do it this way because that's how you be successful. But I think there's kind of a changing narrative as well, that maybe women don't need to be the ones to lean in. Maybe it's the kind of organizations and the systems that need to be leaning into women and the way they work. Do you have any views on that, Jayne, around, where does the responsibility lie for moving that dial?
Well, it has to be both. So I think, the example of Barclays, the organization is setting targets, there are programs of work to support women. There's always more that we can do. But we also need to give and help women be confident and back themselves, because otherwise they're going to feel like they've been put in roles that they're not comfortable with, and we've got to somehow get over this confidence thing. And you're right in the stat, I'll make it up, but I think there is data to suggest that if there are 10 things on a job spec, a male will look at it and go, amazing, I've got 4, I'm going to apply, I would be awesome. And we feel we have to have 8, 9, 10 before we're confident to put our hand up. And having done a lot of hiring, I probably wish I'd known this years ago, but as a hiring manager, the perfect candidate never ever exists. Right? There is, and you cram the job spec full of all these things that you'd love, knowing full well that that perfect candidate doesn't exist. And actually now, far more, I look for attitude than I do for skills. The shelf life for skills is shorter and shorter. You know, whether it's digitization, the pace of technology change, you know, you can hire a brilliant technologist today and their skill sets are out of date in 2 years. So unless they're able to continuously learn, it's really what you're buying is that kind of cultural affiliation and an attitude. And that I have employed people, some of them have been wild cards where they've never done the job before, but I've been so impressed by their energy and their attitude. I just know that they'll make a positive difference. So you've got to go for it.
Yeah, you're right. I think the world is just moving at such a fast pace now. No one's an expert in anything anymore. You have to rely on it. On attitude. Agree. Something that we were really keen to ask you about was, when were you first put in a leadership position, and were you young or did that come later on in your career?
I'm trying to think back. So I probably was mid-late 20s, managing kind of a reasonably sized team as a consultant then. I didn't move into kind of a commercial industry, full-time industry role until I was just over 30, early 30s. But I was managing teams of consultants. And I think I always remember when I moved from consulting into banking, thinking, okay, well, I've managed teams, I've managed, you know, global teams, I'm a people leader. And then of course, you know, I quickly realized that in a consulting world, everybody's a graduate, everyone's pretty self-motivated. I hadn't really been managing them, they've been managing themselves to a large extent. I might have been scheduling some work, but I was really kidding myself. And then I landed in you know, one of the biggest banks in the UK, and I had people that were 20 years older than me, that had been in the bank for 35 years, that had come from, you know, all walks of life and all different industries. And it really tested me. All of a sudden I had to learn to manage individuals because they were so different. But I loved it and I haven't looked back. Much more interesting than consulting.
Yeah, sorry to any consultants listening to this.
I'm sorry.
No, that's really interesting, and I'm glad you brought up a bit about the kind of demographics or dynamics in your team, because a question I had was, have you ever felt really out of your depth as a leader? I think so. For me and Lucy, we joined Barclays on the graduate scheme, and you know, I think when you're working on a graduate program, you're always kind of going to be the most junior person in a team anyway. So there's no, you know, you don't really think about being seen as more experienced than that. But then once you roll off and you get that promotion, all of a sudden you're not the most junior person in the team, or not necessarily. And there's this dynamic of this person might be older than me or more experienced than me, but in terms of grade, I might be a bit higher than them. How do you handle that when you are actually their leader?
That's a great question, because I do still remember how I felt, and there is a bit of an imposter syndrome. I think that, you know, there are a few things as leaders that we need to do. So you need to provide clarity on the vision. You need to make sure everybody's got clear objectives that they can link back. And then you need to make the agenda on a kind of a one-to-one or a team basis much more about them than it is about you. And that will help you, because if you're always focused on, oh my gosh, I feel out of my depth, I think I should know the answer to that, or I know I'm not feeling super confident. One, hopefully you've got a great line manager that can help you along the way as well. But two, I think for most people, their time at work, the biggest influence over whether or not they love their job is their line manager.
Mm.
And it doesn't mean you have to be the expert or know their job better than them. But if they feel that you've got their back, that you're supporting them, that you're giving them the space to develop, you're giving them feedback, they will perform much more than they would for a bad line manager. You'll build high performing teams of people who want to overperform because they value the fact that you're investing in them and you care about them. And that's a duty of care thing, but it will help you build your confidence. I could spend a long time on that topic. I'll be happy to come back to it at any point if you think that's valuable, but it will help you feel less out of your depth, because all they want is to know that you care about them, the work that they do, and you can help them link what they're doing every day back to a bigger objective, strategy, or mission.
It reminds me of something.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's really interesting. And I was going to say, it reminds me of something that I listened to in another podcast. It was from Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, where he said that he thought the success of his business relied on him, but actually it was how he made his workers feel and how empowered he made them. And that's what makes a business successful, not actually you as an individual. So that's,
it's back to that transferable skills point we were saying as well, that you can be an expert today, but you might not be tomorrow. But if you're still like empowering people and your attitude's right, then that will carry through.
There's a really lovely quote by Maya Angelou, and I won't get it precisely right, but it's, I've learned that people will forget what you did, they'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I think that a line manager can have a real impact on the way people feel when they turn up to work. How comfortable do they feel bringing their whole selves? There's such an impact that we can have as leaders.
Yes. Amazing. I have one more question before we kind of conclude, and obviously Nikki, shout if you do as well. Slightly more controversial, so that you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I would love to know. You're like a superwoman to me. What's the biggest mistake you've made as a leader, or the most common mistake you see leaders making?
That's a diplomatic way to put it, Lucy.
I'd maybe call out a couple of things, and I definitely made these mistakes, but I do think they're more common than just me. I think we touched on one before. So thinking that you have to have all the answers, or thinking that you have to be the expert. The other one is actually doing more talking than you should. And I think as you become more senior, you need to do more listening. And really actively listen, because as the more senior you get, the further you get from the end customer, and there's a danger that you're surrounded by people who tell you what they think you want to hear, as opposed to what's really going wrong. So I think you need to develop some really good questions, and then you need to listen really carefully to the answers. So I think as you become more confident, that becomes easier. But I think I've definitely made the mistake from feeling like I was an imposter, desperately trying to know all the answers, or feeling that I had to speak up and give my opinion as the leader. Whereas now I would say it's flipped, and I know that if I give my view too early, I influence the group, and also I dampen the diversity of input, so I try and speak last. And it took me a while to get to that point, so I definitely made a whole load of mistakes before learning some of the things that I do today. I also think it can be difficult going back to, if you find you're a different in a sea of other people, it might be male, female, extroverts, introverts. There are some tricks and tips to make sure that when you're in a meeting, you're contributing and your voice is heard. Because the worst thing you want to do is pitch up to a meeting, not say anything, because you're invisible. So if you're at a meeting, do your preparation, write the minutes of the meeting before it even happens. That was a tip that somebody gave me. And it might not be on every agenda item, but if you've got, 1, 2, or 3 that are really important, and you write down the outcome that you think is going to be most helpful, that can help shape your point and keep it kind of crystal. If you find that you're with a bunch of extroverts and there's literally no room for you to interject, nobody's drawing for breath, and it's hard for you to make your point, then sometimes summarizing and playing back at the end of a conversation, and particularly if you haven't got a strong point, that sometimes that can help, because quite often what people say and what others hear are different. Yeah, so sometimes can I just summarize what I think I've heard you say, so that we're all on the same page here, is effective. Sometimes it's particularly when there's something contentious, or something that you don't agree with, that's the best time to make a point, because you can say, oh, I don't think I agree with that. That will make everybody go and stop. Then you can say, well, if I clarify, I'd like to split it into 2. When you said this, that resonates, but when you said this, I'm not sure I agree, or can you unpack that? When you say you disagree or you don't like it, help me understand why. So there are some ways that I think you can ensure that you make a contribution to a meeting, rather than thinking, oh my God, I can't get a word in here.
I wish I learned that when I was on the grad scheme. So many times I was like, I would love to talk right now. I just don't know.
It's hard.
Yeah. Amazing.
I think I'd want to ask a follow-up question on that, is when you're in that, well, I guess looking at it from both sides, when you're in that situation and you're the leader, the person's going to be making the decision, how do you come to terms with the fact that you might be challenged, and making sure the kind of voices of your team are heard, but also if you still disagree, what you do? But then on the other side, if you're maybe the more junior or less experienced colleague, I think those tips you've given there are really good in terms of making sure you speak up. But if you're really struggling with challenge, like how to, I guess, give yourself that confidence and comfort that it's okay to go against the grain.
Look, I think it's practice. So the sooner you start, the better. And there are ways of putting things. So you can say, look, I probably have a different view, or I'm probably looking at this from a very different lens to the rest of you, but the way I see it is slightly differently. Can I just check that I've understood it right? Because this is how I'm thinking about it. Is a really kind of non-conflict, contentious way of putting a different view on the table. I think as a leader, if it's a particularly tough decision, ultimately I'm accountable for it. But what I have learned, I would say maybe a few years ago, I was probably wedded to that decision's right, that decision's wrong. And these days, what I'm looking for is an opportunity to move us in the right direction, even if it's only a step. So I'm trying to think of an example. So there was a decision that I wanted to make quite recently, and I was a bit of a lone voice. So I said, okay, so why don't we do this? Let's do an experiment. I think we should go this way. You're a bit worried about it and would prefer us to stay here. Let's run an experiment. How long do we think we should run the experiment for? What kind of data should we collect? When should we check in to see? And actually, we've been able to move forward. We haven't got to the point where I would ideally like us to get to, but we've moved, and everybody's aligned. So that alignment, taking time to make sure that if it's a big decision, and I think it's Facebook that talk about, no, it's Amazon that talk about one-way doors and then two-way doors. So if it's a decision that you make, which is a one-way door you can't come back from, you should probably take a lot of time. If it's a decision that you can back out of and come back, then just test, just experiment.
Yes.
That's really good. Cool. Yeah. So we'll wrap up in a minute, but I'm conscious that we kind of, at the start of our discussion, you brought up around being a leader in tech and how important it is to have diversity in technology. I just wanted to give you the space to kind of talk about why you think that's so important and any examples of where a lack of diversity has hindered us and kind of, I guess, development in the tech world.
If you look at our customer base, it's about 50-50. Actually, it's 51% women and 49% men, which always makes me smile. Don't ask me why. And I think, like any product company or consumer-based industry, if your team can't understand your customer base and what they want, you're not going to win. So if our technologists aren't full of people that look like our customers, we're not going to be designing products that actually meet their needs and do what they need them to do for their lives. You know, I love technology, but what I like more is creating something that helps human beings, helps our customers. And I genuinely believe that technology can help make our customers' lives easier. But we'll only understand how if, you know, our technology team understand and think like our customers. So they've got to come from all different walks of life. You know, when you've got 24 million customers, they come from every single background, every single race, religion, you name it. So our teams need to look like that. Otherwise, we won't develop, you know, the mobile app to work for everybody. And we'll design it for a very small segment of our customers. And that's just a gap that our competitors will jump into and do a better job if we don't do that.
Yeah. You can't just take a man's product and turn it pink and assume women will love it.
Yeah, exactly. Very good.
Yeah, that was really nicely summarized. Cool. So at the end of all of our episodes, we have always asked the same questions to all our guests. There's no right or wrong answer at all. That's the beauty of it. So we would really like to ask you, what gives you confidence?
There's one thing that's popped into my mind. So I remember being asked to apply for a role and having that moment where I thought, oh God, I don't know if I can do it. And then I thought, if I don't say yes, then a man will be appointed to this role. And I'm letting down all those women out there if I don't do it. So quite often, you know, when you're thinking about confidence, it's because we're kind of so inward looking. And the minute that you kind of make your thoughts and your purpose all about helping others, I can take on the world.
Nice.
I love that. I don't think we've ever had that answer before. I really, really like that.
I like that a lot. Nice.
I find myself wanting to thank you for your service. I feel like you're doing it for all of us, and for that I want to thank you.
Well, hopefully, and thank you. I mean, the pod is just amazing. You're reaching so many people, and we do all need to help each other. So thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lucy. It's been absolutely delightful. I'm so pleased that you invited me. Really an honour for me to be here today. Thank you.
What gives you confidence? Let us know on Instagram by searching Her Own Boss Podcast, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the latest on finding your inner entrepreneur. This episode is sponsored both by Rise, created by Barclays, and Barclays Eagle Labs. Rise and Eagle Labs are on a mission to support female founders shape the future of entrepreneurship by providing access to networks, mentorship, and training. Search Rise, created by Barclays, or Barclays Eagle Labs to find out more.